Have you ever wondered how many different ways there are to tint clear epoxy? Stay tuned and I'm gonna show you how. All right guys, so we're starting off with a bucket of clear epoxy. If you'd like to see the steps and the mixing process of how we got this, check out the link that's in the description of this video. Each medium is gonna give you a different way to tint. We're gonna start off with mica powder. That seems to be a very popular and probably one of the most used mediums to tint the epoxy. A mica powder is actually a very, very finely ground mica. It comes in sheets, all right? So it's very, very finely ground and it's in a powder. Now, there are different qualities of mica powder. You want to make sure that you get a very high quality, pure mica. A lot of the micas that you get out there will be cut with maybe talc, and you have to use a ton of product to get the opacity that you want. Now, this is a pro tip. When you're mixing the mica powder, you want to create a slurry before you add your epoxy. And we're gonna do this with isopropyl alcohol. So, powder, add a little bit of alcohol. This is 91%. And I'm gonna create a paste. Now the reason we do this is this helps when we add our epoxy to not get little dry balls, I guess you would call it, almost like when you're mixing brownie mix. This is going to ensure that all of our powder is mixed thoroughly. Now, also, if you're using cups that has a little ridge right here at the bottom, make sure you really get into that little ridge and you mix it. All right, so now we have our slurry and we're ready for the epoxy. And by adding that slurry, it mixes really easily with the epoxy. All right, now we have a metallic color and the epoxy is actually tinted. The mica powder actually changed the color of the epoxy. All right, that's one way. The rest of the tinting, you can actually add it directly to the epoxy. All right, the next one we're gonna use is our opaque dyes. These are by Alumilite. We sell all of these products on our website. The Alumilite dyes are very, very pigmented, so a little bit goes a long way. And what I really like about these opaque dyes, you can actually add a tiny little drop, and even though it's an opaque dye, we can almost make a transparent color out of it. So by just adding a tiny bit, you can actually kind of see through it. And the way that I test it is when I lift it, I can actually see the grain of my stir stick. Now, if I want it opaque, I'm gonna add a couple of more drops, stir it up, and now you're gonna have a really opaque dye. And you can get this as opaque as you need it. Very opaque. So depending on how much you put in there, it's gonna determine the opacity. Next, a paste. Now this is used almost exactly like our dyes. Our paste are just a little more concentrated colors. I really love the paste. We sell 3 different brands on our website: Just Resin, Color Passion, and Color Obsession. And all of them are absolutely beautiful. But the paste are very, very deep pigmented, very heavily pigmented. You can get them in a metallic or a non-metallic. So you'll see how little it takes, and they mix great in the epoxy. Very opaque, very metallic. That happened to be Just Resin, and that color is almond, one of my very, very favorite colors. Our first color that we used on our mica powder is Blue Earth. All right, another way to tint your epoxy is with actual spray paint. When you're doing this, I like to tint only an amount of epoxy that I may be using as maybe an accent. If I'm doing 60 square foot of kitchen, I'm not gonna tint all my epoxy with spray paint. I'm only gonna save that for the accents. One is you'll never get an opaque color with a spray paint. It's gonna give you more of a transparent color. All right, so when you do this, it's super important, guys. Protect yourself. Put a mask on if you're not in a well-ventilated area. Cover your bucket or cover your cup and spray. Now, you don't want to spray directly into a plastic cup unless you already have epoxy inside. What'll happen is the spray paint will cause your plastic cup to melt. Ask me how I know that. All right, so if you add too much spray paint and try to get a really opaque color, you're gonna really compromise the integrity of your epoxy because you're gonna make it very, very runny, and you don't wanna do that. So this is the opacity. This happens to be a nutmeg, which is a light brown. One of my favorite additives, and it doesn't actually tint the epoxy, it just gives a beautiful shimmer. It's a product called diamond dust. We also have gold dust, and the dust is a finer material than a glitter, a finer particle than a glitter, but it's a bigger particle than the mica powder. So it kind of stays suspended in the epoxy. It doesn't necessarily color the epoxy. It's still clear, but you'll be able to see the dust in the clear epoxy. All right, so beautiful. Use it as an accent. Actually, I'll put a little bit of dust in our flood coat, and it doesn't compromise the integrity of the epoxy. All right, so those are several ways and some of the most popular ways that you can tint your epoxy. By doing different mediums and then doing a finish where you incorporate all the mediums, these different products actually work together and they'll fight each other as you put them on a board, and you get some really cool reactions. So anytime I do a finish, I like to use different coloring techniques all in the same finish. All right, so now let's pour these out on the surface, and that way you guys can see kind of the difference in each one. All right, this is our mica powder. This is a beautiful shade. This is our blue earth, and you can see the mica powders will give a really pretty metallic finish. All right, this is our opaque dye. Now I know we're on white, but you guys can kind of get an idea. So this white, it's a Lumelite white dye, and it is a non-metallic dye. Beautiful color. What I really like about the opaque dyes is, like I said, they're not a metallic, and they really do work well in a finish where you do have some metallics. It just kind of blends in really nice. If you're doing a Carrara marble or you're doing something that's just mostly white, the Lumelite dye is a perfect dye for that. All right, here we go with the Just Resin Paste. Now you'll notice it's a lot like our mica powder. It's metallic, but it's very heavily pigmented. Now, unlike our metallic powder, our paste, the particles aren't going to sink and you won't get that softening of the finish. On our metallic powders, you'll notice that as you wait, the metallic powder starts to get a real soft finish. So what we often do is when we use a lot of metallics is I'll wait 30, 45 minutes and I'll come back and I'll kind of wake up my metallics. And what that does is it brings those particles back up to the surface and really gives some cool designs. Spray paint. Now you'll notice our spray paint is not as opaque as the rest of our colorants. And my favorite to use in accents and on our flood coat is our diamond dust. Now, like I said earlier, our diamond dust is not really tinting the epoxy. It's just giving a sheen. A little diamond dust goes a long way. We also have a gold dust that really does bring out the sheen. All right, so when you're creating finishes and you're learning how to work with epoxy, it's really important to learn how to use each of these colorants. Because like I said earlier, if you'll do a finish and you'll incorporate several different types of tinting, you'll get some great reactions as they work together in one finish. All right, guys, I hope you like these short little informative videos. If you do, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel and hit the little bell. That way you guys will know every single time that we post a video. Also, leave me some comments below. Let me know what colors you like the best. What are your favorite additives? And maybe leave me some suggestions on what you would like to see on our channel. But most of all, guys, remember, don't be scared. Move forward and be creative. See you next week.